Welcome to Brainfluence. I'm Roger Dooley. The last year has seen a lot of action in the neuromarketing and consumer neuroscience space. And one of the latest developments is the coming together of Smart Eye, a Swedish company that previously acquired emotion AI firm Affectiva, and iMotions Global, a Danish firm that calls itself a biosensor software platform. iMotions will become part of Smart Eye but operate independently. Joining me today are Perter Hartzbech, CEO of iMotions, and Martin Krantz, CEO of Smart Eye. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Perter, you refer to iMotions as a software platform for measuring human behavior. Can you unpack that a little bit and explain what you mean?
Yes, of course. So basically, what we have built is what we call a multimodal research software. So it means that we combine a lot of different sensors together, a lot of different input in order to understand human behavior. And if you imagine who the typical client would be, it's if you go to Harvard, Yale, MIT, Stanford, their behavioral labs is kind of where iMotions has our core clients, both within psychology, psychiatry, economics, basically across all different departments on the schools. We have approximately 1,300 clients, whereas I think close to 1,000 is universities. So so that's the general client portfolio.
So what kind of applications, like what are they, first of all, what are the most common metrics that they're using? Because I think that you say you can measure 50 different types of sensors, but what are the commonly used ones? And what would a typical application be, particularly a business-oriented application, since many of our audience members are in business?
So the main modalities that people use today starts with eye tracking. So eye tracking, most people know. So basically observing the eye exactly where you look. And you can also measure pupil dilations and so on out of the eye. Second is facial expressions, and that's where it's relevant with regards to Affectiva. That's now also part of the Smart Eye group. They own the best facial expression software in the world for behavioral metrics purposes as well. And then the third thing that is general part of the general package is galvanic skin response. So basically what you normally have used as a lie detection test in the military, just basically measuring the sweat on the fingers. And that's kind of the three main modalities, as we call it. And then if you're more advanced, you can also use EEG, for example, EMG, muscle contractions, respiration, and other sensors. But the main use specifically for commercial companies would be user experience. So if you imagine a large company like Expedia, for example, they can test a website really quickly. So they call in the developers, they live observe, and that's really what's key to our platform, that we can live measure these things. So you as a researcher can sit and see exactly where people look, where they're clicking, what are they doing, and then what are their emotional response. So for example, if they have a brow furrow, maybe if there's something they can't find on the website, is a very typical application area. But also within, of course, neuromarketing, right? Ads, images, videos, packaging, all these kind of areas people also use our platform.
So is iMotions conducting any of these studies for clients, or is basically iMotions a software platform that is used by clients like Expedia and others?
Yeah, great question. So iMotions is a software house. So we are 100% focused on building software that can take your research from end to end, starting with study setups, collecting data, analyzing data, and then creating easy reports. We don't do any services. The only services that we do is that we do workshops, of course, where we go out to the universities or to the end client to train them, onboarding and stuff like that. But we don't do like full service research studies.
And are these studies performed typically in a lab setting, a controlled setting, or are they done remotely using device cams and such?
So basically, iMotions has been all about the lab the last 17 years. So providing a lab with equipment, software, and training around it. But actually here, since COVID hit, it was pretty problematic, since a lot of people call, hey, Peter, I cannot get into our lab. What should we do? And then we actually accelerated our online portfolio of products. So we have actually built an eye tracking algorithm for web camera, where we also have added the Affectiva facial expression engine. So now we can actually use the whole desktop platform, but really apply the study online. So you can use all the advanced ways of setting up studies inside iMotions, where we also have our own survey platform. Send it out to people's own laptop or computer as we sit here today. collect the data, gather them back to the desktop, and then use all the analysis features that we actually have built over the last 17 years in the desktop. So the answer is yes, it is primarily a lab, but also now online products. And the newest thing that I just want to mention is our mobile platform, where you basically have this as the future lab, where we have a lot of smaller sensors that can be used for more longer-term observations on patients, for example, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and stuff like that, but also for more consumer studies, self-studies, in-store studies, and so on. So that's the short answer.
Martin, how does iMotions fit into the overall Smart Eye business? And how does this fill out your suite of services or products?
It's basically in two ways. So Smart Eye, we started out as an eye tracking company 20 years ago when I started a company. And we started to develop eye trackers that were so robust so that they could work in a car environment. And approximately after the Lehman crash, the car industry was in a slump, and then it rebounded, and things started to go well in automotive again back in 2010 approximately. Then we sort of knew that, the customers are so interested, they really want to put eye trackers that are adapted for automotive. They want to put it in serious production in cars. So we were the last, say, 8-9 years, we've been super busy with taking our technology that was developed for the research lab and making it mature to put it into cars. And since 2018, we are in production, in serious productions, like selling the software for eye tracking for production cars, for BMW and others.
Right, Martin. Why would an auto manufacturer want eye tracking in their cars? What are they doing with this technology, and how is that benefiting the drivers?
Yeah, the two main reasons. Let's say in the 60s, 70s, seatbelts made it into the cars. In the 90s, the airbag made it into the car, and they prevent people from dying if there is a crash. What we do is we're part of the next technology package that prevents crashes, and the human factor is the most common one when it comes to cars crashing. I mean, it's not that the car is flawed. I mean, it's the human behind the wheel, steering wheel, that is. So drowsiness and inattention, they are two of the biggest causes for accidents in car. If you could also, which we cannot do yet, but we are working on it to make it happen, to be able to detect intoxication. If you could detect all three of them, I mean, today there's more than 30,000 people dying in the States every year from car crashes, and most of them would be saved. I mean, a large percentage of them would be saved if cars were equipped with this equipment, and they will be. I mean, we have legislation in Europe that dictates that from 2026 and onwards, there has to be this kind of eye tracking technology on cars if they are allowed to be sold in Europe. And I believe it will come in the States as well.
Presumably, a key use would be if somebody is texting, the car will remind them that they should be looking ahead at the road.
Yeah.
And that's great. And in my home state of Texas here, it seems like every second driver is illegally using their smartphone for something, and there are way too many crashes. So that's a good thing. I'm sure that some people will resent the intrusion in their private space, but it would likely be a very good thing for society. So beyond the automotive applications, what else is Smart Eye doing now? How do you see the business expanding beyond the automotive space?
Yeah, so like between during the 2000s, the first decade, we were developing our eye tracking technology. During the second decade, we were like taking the technology and making it fit for cars, and started to produce cars by the end of last decade. And now we see that you have this attention and drowsiness that drives the technology, and the legislation is behind it, and it's like the seat belt, it's going to be in every car. But we see also that there's an expansion. So when there is a camera that measures the eyes of the driver, the car companies, they want to do a lot more stuff. So they want to build convenience functions on top of the system, right? So that you could, for example, if you drive at night, all the displays could be dimmed a lot unless you look at them, because if you look up, they would illuminate a little bit more. You could control like the rear view wipers. If you look in the rear view mirror, it will swipe. Things like that. You could also use it to see if there is someone in the driver's seat, or even if there's someone in the passenger seat, and that could help you to know if and when to deploy airbags and stuff like that. So there's a lot of applications that are going to be built on top of once you get the camera in the car. So we've been super busy with that, and then we see that there's also many car manufacturers now, that advanced car manufacturers that want to have more cameras in the car and start to detect more stuff. So, for example, there is pets left behind in cars who would die from heat stroke, and even, sadly enough, there are kids that are being forgotten in cars every year by I suppose stressed out parents or so. So there is actually a legislative push to be able to solve that problem, but also like much more mundane problems, so that you forget something in your car, or you forget your purse, you forget your keys, whatever, and trying to detect that. And also there's in certain markets there's a weight sensor on the passenger side for airbag deployment, and there's the car manufacturer want to get rid of that weight sensor and replace it by some optical or passive means sensor. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be a better control if you could actually detect a person visually, rather than just, okay, there's something over 50 pounds on the seat, which could be a package, could be anything else. Peter, I have a question. You mentioned that you had developed and rolled out remote testing capability using device cameras and such. How would you compare the quality of the data generated remotely versus what's created in a lab setting? Is it, we say it's like 90% is good or half as good, or how do you describe it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think, when you do eye tracking from web camera, it's never going to be as good as if you have to buy eye tracker. I mean, definitely that's not going to happen. But I think, the way that you can, if you set up the studies correctly, you can get really, really far with the web-based approach. So let's say, for example, for a lot of studies, it might only be relevant to divide the screen into 4 different areas, for example, where you want to, if you have 4 different packages, see how does the distribution of the attention goes on those 4, for example, right? But if you have things like that is this close to each other, then web-based eye tracking is not the most useful case. But I think the combination of the eye tracking with facial expressions and with surveys, of course, because you also need to use the self-report, right, is a very powerful tool. And I see that a lot of people, they will be using the more high-end, more expensive studies in the lab, but they could use the online for pre-testing, for example. So let's say you have already designed the study, you send it out to a few hundred people online and see, hey, how did the study go? How was the study design? Was it effective? And then you could do the real study in the lab, for example, right? So also for pre-testing, I think it's really useful. And then of course there's the whole thing about that now you can go global, right? So I can sit in Copenhagen here, do a study, send it to Africa, to South America, wherever in the world, gather data extremely quickly and get them back into to the desktop for analysis. So I mean, the whole thing that you don't have to travel out and collect the data is super powerful, right? So I think it's a tool that's in the box together with a lot of other tools, but I think you will both use the lab where you have the high-end equipment that are still coming down in price so that it gets more affordable and people don't only have 1 system but 10 systems, and so on. So you can collect more data there and you get deeper insights, but you combine it with online studies for certain purposes. And then, the mobile is a third way to do it in the toolbox that people, they will also combine with. So I think a combination of all 3 methods is going to be the future.
What about some of the eye tracking simulators that use machine learning or AI to predict what humans might look at if they're looking at an ad or any image or a package or whatever?
I think there's a big part of the answer missing in those kind of technologies. I still would believe more in web-based eye tracking because it is concretely, where are you looking? It's not where do you predict people they will be looking, and that is just a huge difference. So I think the problem is you don't know what you are not seeing, right? I mean, that's the problem with these kind of other technologies. But for example, if you pre-test an image, right, an advertisement, a print ad, for example, you upload it to this, it says, okay, we think the intention will be distributed like this. I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's cheap, it's fast, so it could be a pretty good pre-testing method. But I think also for like moving images and stuff like that, it's going to be difficult to see how technology like that could give you the full answer. And I think what iMotions believe in is to understand as many modalities as possible in order to understand and get the most deep insights into human behavior. And that's kind of where we want to start. And then we will, drill down over time to smaller and smaller devices and more AI and so on. But I think we first need to understand the full picture before we can kind of cut parts out, if you can see what I mean.
Peter, do you see at some point offering, or maybe perhaps you're doing it now, offering this as sort of a SaaS model, software as a service, where it be totally self-service, where somebody could go onto your website and sign up for a certain amount of a number of studies and pretty much have it done in an automated way. So there'd be a relatively inexpensive. We're certainly seeing interest in these kinds of tools elsewhere, using not just eye tracking, but various technologies that would open up the market to much smaller businesses and much smaller problems. Even big businesses can't afford to study every problem they have in depth, but something that it could be done very inexpensively to solve simple problems. Look at two versions of a web ad or something and see which one might outperform visually or whatever.
I think that's definitely the path. That there'll be some parts of studies that will be relevant for that. But I think that's also, again, it's maybe the fourth tool in the box, right? And actually in the group here, we will have Affectivus Media Analytics, as you probably know. They have built for facial expression, like very quickly testing advertising, small movies, throw them up on the server, you collect some data, and then you have some dashboards that show smileys of how many percent were happy, how many people were sad, and so on. And I think these tools definitely have a use, but I think you also have to really understand when and where to use them. But I definitely think us as a group will for sure have some more coming in that space in the future, especially now when we can combine the eye tracking algorithms to the facial expressions that are already in the media analytics platform. So for sure, there's gonna be for example, if it's the same stimuli length, 30-second advertisement, or 1 hour trailers or whatever, like, so you can really compare and create benchmarks that make sense. There, I believe it has a great potential.
One area that's of particular interest to me is the conference space and the training space. We're seeing in-person events coming back now. And, one of the things that's always sort of perplexed, I think, organizers when they are hiring trainers or speakers is, is this any good? How do we evaluate of the 4 trainers we've had or the 10 speakers today, how the audience reacted to each one? And the traditional way is to do audience surveys. And that is, as we know, is typically not very accurate and hard to get people to do even.
Way.
So, how do you see these technologies as being applied to that space, or do you?
Yes, I definitely see this as a very interesting area to explore more, all types of training, conferencing, and so on. And the basic answer to me is that just as you can measure the consumer's engagement with an advertisement, you could also, of course, do it in a live session, in a training session, and something like that, just to see how engaged are people. Are they giving some sort of emotional response, or are they just blank in their faces and really distracted, looking elsewhere, and so on? I mean, so I see this as something super important to explore. I don't know if you, Peter, have actually started to explore it on your side of the business. We haven't, but
yeah, I think that this is actually an excellent case for our newest mobile platform, right? So if you imagine you come into a conference the World Neuromarketing Forum, for example, right? Then the future will be that you have the phone, we have an app running on the phone, and potentially some patched sensors. And then you could have some beacons, let's say when you go into the main audience hall, for example, right? Then you would have some beacons that actually track that you walk into the room. So then it triggers surveys based on beacons, for example. So what this platform can do is that it can observe you throughout the whole day, and then it can trigger surveys when you are in a specific reaction, or like on a specific context, also in front of a specific booth, for example. You come over to iMotions booth, say, hey, how did you like it, and so on. So this is an application that we have actually already built that functions today. And then you could have other sensors. For example, in the lecture room, you could have a camera that observes everybody with facial expression, so you could see the general mood at the same time as you have the mood coming from each people on their phones, right? So I think stuff like that is definitely going to be the future. We also work with some eye tracking glasses. Now, if we talk training, for example, I see that's as a bit of a different field where we can actually observe from very far distance. If you want to train people on a drilling platform, now you have a lot of different kinds of audience. It's not only neuromarketing here, but in large corporations when they have to train people. So what we can work on with eye tracking there is that we can basically have people wearing eye tracking glasses see exactly what they look at in real time, and then you can have talk to them on the platform on what they're doing, how they should repair stuff, and so on, even though you sit on the other side of the globe. So that's another example of how training is going to be interesting. And the last piece, I think, is our VR side. So virtual reality is quite big. We work with a lot of companies in that space where we also have eye tracking and sensors together. I also believe that's the next big thing happening.
That's probably a pretty good place to wrap up. I wish both you gentlemen success with the combination of your two companies, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Roger.